One reason landscape photography can be frustrating is that you have little control over what appears in the frame. Sometimes you can't move into the right position because there's something in the way. Other times people wander into the frame, or you just miss something in the corner because it's difficult to see at the time. This photo is a good example where part of the foreground crept into the bottom left corner. There's also a tall tree in the foreground that looks out of place amongst the silver birch trees. Let's look at correcting these with the first technique, which is using the Remove tool. This was first added to Photoshop in 2023, and it created quite a stir at the time because it made removing objects from an image much easier. I'll start by adding a new empty layer to the image by clicking on the icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. You can also use the New Layers option found in the Layer menu. Next, I'll select the Remove tool from the Photoshop Tools palette. It's grouped with several other repair tools, so one of those might actually be displayed instead. If you can't find the group, press J on your keyboard to select the current tool in the group. You can then right-click on the icon to display the group, where you can choose the Remove tool. When using the Remove tool, I like to make my repair onto a new layer, which is why I added the new empty layer. That way, if I make a mess, I can easily delete the layer and start again. But remember, because the image uses multiple layers, you now need to ensure that the Sample All Layers option is selected, or the tool won't work properly. Another feature that makes the Remove tool easier to use is unticking the Remove after each brushstroke option. This then allows you to build up a selection with multiple brush strokes before choosing to apply a fix to the area. Also, if I decide I haven't painted the selection well enough, there's a reset icon to remove it and start again. To create the selection, I click with my mouse and then paint over the area while continuing to hold down the button. But because I untick the Remove after each brushstroke option, I can actually release the mouse button without anything happening. This makes it much easier to zoom in and move around the image to select the area to remove. Then when I'm happy that I've painted the selection that I need, I can click the tick icon in the toolbar to remove the object. Photoshop then analyzes the area and removes the selected object using something suitable to replace it. The Remove tool is easy to use and it usually does a good job of removing unwanted objects. Now let's add another new layer to fix the corner of the frame where we see part of the foreground. After adding the layer, I'll select the area using the Remove tool. I can then apply the fix by clicking the tick icon in the toolbar. But let's zoom in to take a closer look at this repair. Notice that it's soft, and that's probably because the area that I selected was also soft, so it's replaced something similar. To make a better repair of this area, let's try the second method of removing unwanted objects. The first step is to create a consolidated layer, sometimes called a stamp layer. To do this, I'll use the keyboard shortcut Shift plus Option plus Command plus E on my keyboard. If you're using a Windows PC, that's Shift plus Control plus Alt plus E. You can then see the new top layer that's been added to the Layers panel. I've created this because I want to select and copy part of the image. Once we've done that, we'll be able to delete the layer. Next, I'll select the Lasso tool from the Photoshop Tools palette. In the toolbar, I want to use the New Selection option. I'll also ensure that the feather is set to 0 for this. And I'll also use the anti-alias option, although it doesn't really matter for what we're doing. I'll then click on the image and whilst holding down the mouse button, draw around the area that I want to select to be replaced. As I do this, I'm allowing some space so that I'm drawing away from the object that I want to remove. Then, when I release the mouse button, it completes the selection and we see the marching ants. Now, with the Lasso tool still selected, I can click and drag the selection with my mouse. This allows me to reposition it without affecting the image. I can then move it over an area that's suitable for covering the unwanted object. When the selection's in place, I'll press Command and J on my keyboard to copy that part of the image to a new layer. If you're using a Windows PC, that's Control and J on your keyboard. You can then see the new layer that this creates in the Layers panel. Now we can use the Move tool, which is at the top of the Tools palette, to move the copied part of the image into position. This looks good now, but we can see the edge of the layer in parts, so let's zoom in to fix this. To fix the problem, I'll first add a layer mask to the new copy layer. I can then paint onto the layer mask using black to blend the two layers together. If I reveal part of the unwanted object by accident, I'll switch to painting with white to hide it again. But let's backtrack a little, because there's an even easier technique for removing unwanted areas of an image, which is the Patch tool. First, I'll delete the two layers I've just created. Then I'll add a new empty layer where I'll make the repair. As before, I'll use the Lasso tool to draw around the area that I want to replace. I'll then select the Patch tool from the Photoshop Tools palette. You'll find this in the same group as the Remove tool that we looked at earlier. Now that the Patch tool is selected, I'll check that it's set to use the Content Aware fill, as this gives the best results. And I'll also check that I have the Sample All Layers option ticked. I can then move the mouse pointer over selection and drag it just as we did in the previous example. This time when I drag the selection though, you can see the area below the mouse pointer overlaid in the corner. This is to help you select a good area of the image to use for the patch. Then when I release the mouse button, Photoshop makes the repair, removing the unwanted object. As you can see, this has made a pretty good repair, and because it's on a new layer, I can turn that off and on to check the results. Let's hide that though, because I want to show you a fourth way to remove anything from an image, and this is the most powerful and probably one of the easiest to use. The first step is to draw roughly around the object or area in the image that you want to remove. You can do this using the Lasso tool, and as my selection is already in place, I'll just use that. I'll then click on the Edit menu and choose the Generative Fill option. This was added to Photoshop 2024 when it was released in September of 2023. We now see the Generative Fill dialog prompting us to enter something to help Photoshop understand what we want to add to the image. But rather than entering a prompt, I just need to click the Generative Fill button. This causes Photoshop to analyse the image and to use that to determine what to generate. We then see Photoshop begin to process, and a new Generative Fill layer is added in the Layers panel. What's good about this is that we can choose a different variation in the Properties window if we don't like what Photoshop generates. But if we don't think any of the variations are suitable, we can click the Generate button again. If you're a working photographer or you need to fix a never-to-be-repeated photo, these techniques can save you, along with this one. We can use it to change the colour of any object in an image. If you want to see how that's done, watch this video next. Thanks for watching today, and I hope you liked the demonstration. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you soon for another video.